Warm welcome to the Finnish Research Impact Foundation's webinar on the state of industry-academia collaboration in humanities, arts and social sciences. My name is Petro Poutanen. I'm the CEO of the foundation, and I will just say a few opening words before we go into the actual seminar program. Just to inform, we are recording the seminar for the future use. So just a few words about who we are. What is the Finnish Research Impact Foundation? The foundation was established by the Finnish government in 2019, and the foundation is dedicated to advancing industry-academia cooperation in Finland. So basically we fund joint research between top researchers and companies, and currently we have around 30 active collaborative projects from different fields ongoing in Finland. And in the foundation, we've been thinking about the means to enhance collaboration also in the fields of humanities, social sciences and arts with industry. But despite our efforts, only 8% of all the applications we have received within our history have been received from these fields. So we've been thinking about what's the logic behind these figures, why people and researchers are not looking for funding for collaborative projects from these fields. So this is why we started 6 months ago an investigation of the state of industry-academia collaboration in humanities, arts and social sciences. And that's why we are here today. And now we are excited to publish the results of this investigation and host this seminar also with some wonderful invited speakers. So welcome everybody to our webinar, and feel free to share the insights of our investigation on social media. And while doing that, you can use the hashtag #StateOfShape to join the conversation. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Aurora.
Thank you. So next, I will go into presenting a little bit more about the actual white paper. So my name is Aurora Airaskorpi, and I am the main author of the white paper. And I'm truly excited to be here today and see such a big crowd interested in this topic. I myself am an independent writer and author, and my background is in social sciences, so I can empathize with everyone we've been getting to know through this research. I'm also a social impact coach and work with people and organizations in the fields of science and innovation to turn expertise into impact. I've been working intently with the Finnish Research Impact Foundation since its establishment, helping them to communicate how scientists are improving the world we live in through collaboration with companies. My co-author for this white paper is Outi Vanharanta. She's the Research Impact Officer of the Foundation. And together we've gathered all the material, gone through it, produced insights, and now condensed them into this white paper that we will be talking about here today. So as Petro mentioned, only 8% of grant applications received by the Finnish Research Impact Foundation come from the social sciences, humanities, and arts. And this is what prompted us in the beginning to ask, how could impactful collaboration between shape disciplines and industry be furthered to benefit academic research, industry, and society as a whole? We soon learned that similar investigations have been conducted in different parts of Europe, and especially in the UK. So we wanted to build our work upon previous research, and thus chose to use the acronym SHAPE to describe the social sciences, humanities, and arts. This acronym was coined by the British Academy in 2020, and today we have the president of the British Academy, Julia Black, with us to describe their work around SHAPE a little bit more, so I won't go too much into detail with that. But we choose to use this acronym instead of the previously used SSH and AHSS because it's a bit easier, but also because it encompasses the view that these fields can benefit both the economy and the people. So it brings them to a societal context, which we thought was really important for the work we're doing here. We did a 6-month-long investigation that included a roundtable with representatives of Finnish academic institutions and other stakeholders. We also did in-depth qualitative interviews with European experts on the topic, and then we conducted an online survey for Finnish academic and industry representatives. We soon learned through the survey that 60% of the academic survey respondents think that industry-academia collaboration helps them answer their research questions. 80% of the enterprise survey respondents think that SHAPE research can have a positive influence on their ideation and innovation activities. So we can definitely see that both parties can and should benefit from each other. We asked these academics and enterprises, most of whom had previous experience of collaborations, to evaluate these benefits in a bit more detail. The academics said that they see benefits such as opportunity to increase the impact of their research, growing their networks, and getting new research ideas. Companies, on the other hand, saw benefits such as developing new services, absorbing new knowledge, and strengthening their skills. Many of the enterprise respondents were based in the service industries, so that might highlight why developing new services was so important. But through the literature review we did, we also learned that especially the service industries can benefit from these kind of collaborations because their focus is so much on improving the user experience and understanding user-centric mechanics to build and create new products. We also can see that corporate social responsibility is one of the top benefits for companies. And this kind of social responsibility and social and societal impact seem to be a mutual benefit that both of the parties can align with. And we can see that there is something in that space that could bring these two areas closer together, and that could be a good starting point for collaborations in the future. But despite the known benefits, these collaborations are still quite rare to find. So we really wanted to understand why so. We asked the survey respondents what kind of obstacles and challenges stand in the way in forging these collaborations. We got several open-ended replies, and we then categorized them into these different classes. So the three main challenges were lack of time and different rhythms. This means that companies and scientists work in different organizational tempos, as many of us know. Scientific research, typically slow. Companies, on the other hand, are usually working on a much faster pace. So there are some disparities of how could we work together when the tempos are different. Also, both actors found it difficult to find the time to initiate collaboration because their lives and working lives are quite busy. The second category was finding contacts and initiating collaboration. We understood that there are very few places for SHAPE disciplines, especially, and companies to meet each other. And without having these networks and natural places for casual chat or conversation, it's quite difficult to even start a conversation about collaborating. The third most important aspect was these financial constraints. We know that SHAPE disciplines receive less funding than STEM disciplines in general due to many factors. But also we noticed that the most typical forms of collaboration with SHAPE disciplines and companies are quite limited to lectures, consulting, quite small-scale processes and collaborations that resemble freelance work more than joint research projects. So maybe they are not even seen or categorized as research collaboration from a funding perspective. The lack of mutual understanding, that was the fourth challenge, is something that has to do with language and the way we speak about impact and the projects. We noticed that researchers in the SHAPE fields are more motivated by terminology such as societal impact, whereas companies are typically quite concerned with the economic impact of their projects. So we can see that there's some disparities in the language that could be bridged through open conversation. So next, I'll summarize the 3 key findings from our work that we feel should be investigated further through academic research and also practical trials. Key finding 1 is that systemic approaches need to be developed to increase industry-academia collaboration within the shaped context. At the moment, we are lacking the systemic approaches, and we are very reliant on personal networks, prior experience, or similar collaborations in the past, or just pure chance. These collaborations, from what we know, are typically initiated by individuals who have already done a project together or who have some type of contact with a company or with a researcher from the past. So we lack the necessary support from academic organizations, funders, and companies, as well as the academic community, to make this type of collaboration a natural part of research work. And this is where all the different institutions can play a role. Our second key finding highlights the importance of networks in creating collaborations. As I mentioned before, it was hard for us to even find places where these 2 areas would meet in a natural way. So we need to find or develop platforms and ways in which researchers and companies unknown to each other can meet and share their expertise and find mutual points of interest. These could be something as simple as networking events, digital platforms, or interdisciplinary teams where SHAPE researchers could create new contacts through, for example, STEM researchers. So they could use other researchers as a node to then find new connections on the business side. We believe that academic organizations can also work as a mediator between researchers and companies, and these type of structures already exist in some universities. However, we believe that more emphasis needs to be placed in making the unique aspects of social sciences, humanities, and arts visible to the company representatives. Our third finding shows that we need new means to discuss and evaluate impact. We know that collaborations between STEM fields and industry deliver outcomes such as patents, products, spin-out companies. These aren't typically areas in which SHAPE disciplines can bring most value. So to understand and evaluate the impact of SHAPE industry collaboration, we need to challenge how we actually evaluate and discuss impact. We also need to set up new ways to assess and measure impact so that we can provide evidence and data on the value of these projects. I invite you all to please download the white paper to learn more about these findings and hear about the proposed and trial solutions to them. In the white paper, you will find examples and case studies from several European countries that showcase some potential means to facilitate these collaborations. You'll also find an executive summary that gathers all our findings and suggests different actions academic organizations, funders, individual researchers, and companies can take in the future to move this process further. You can find the report through this link. We will also share it in the chat. And if you have any questions regarding the content of the white paper, please contact us authors and we will be happy to share more. I thank you on my behalf and encourage you to share all your insights in social media so that we can take this conversation also to the realm outside this webinar and really start to change things in our own organizations and in the society. Next, we will move on to our first keynote speaker. We have Professor Julia Black, who is the chair of Aspect's Steering Group and president of the British Academy. She will share some insights from the work they have done in the past 5 years regarding this topic. If you have questions, please leave them in the Q&A for Julia. There's a Q&A button in your Zoom, so you can leave them directly through there. And we will have a moment after the keynote to go through your questions. Welcome, Julia.
Brilliant. Thank you, Aurora, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the webinar today. And I think your report is excellent. It's fantastic to have that level of detail and research, and the recommendations absolutely resonate with me. So and I'm also delighted that you embrace shape, because as you said, what we really wanted to do in coining the term shape is come up with just a simpler way of describing arts, humanities, and social sciences, which is quite a mouthful otherwise. Secondly, to have something which is simple that can, stand next to STEM. Very easy just to say STEM and shape. And then thirdly, because it really does bring the focus of these disciplines on society, to the fore. And that is really what we wanted to achieve as well. So I'm going to introduce the Aspect Network. So I'm just going to share my screen and take you through some an introduction of what we are trying to do. Can everybody see that? Can you see that?
Yes.
Fantastic. What we are doing in the UK. And the overall context in the UK, just to give you a little bit of background before I dive in, is all universities are assessed periodically through something called the Research Excellence Framework. It's changed its name, varies, but that's what it's currently called. And our research is scored and ranked and peer reviewed, and 25% of the evaluation mark is for impact, the impact of our research. So that was introduced probably back in 2014, I think it was. So we've had 10 years of really having to focus on impact and think very hard about how our work and our research is being mobilized. I call it being mobilized for public good. And as part of that, as you say, there's been a lot of sort of focus on trying to drive impact through business. And through business engagement. But we've also found the challenges that you found, various other studies have found, to get SHAPE researchers to engage in business in the sort of deep systematic way that they seem to be able to achieve, for example, in life sciences or in engineering, which are the two areas where I think it is probably those deep-rooted collaborations are most successful. So we've had one strand which has been focusing on the impact of research. The other policy strand has been focusing on innovation, which is to take the research outputs of our academics in our universities and to create businesses themselves out of those outputs. But again, that has been very focused on deep tech or software enabled, or very, very much on life sciences as well. And again, shape disciplines haven't really been part of that conversation. So what we're doing in Aspect is taking those two strands together to think, well, how can we mobilize the insights, the amazing insights of SHAPE researchers and SHAPE academics in ways which are scalable and sustainable, so as you say, which are also create systematic impacts which go beyond the ad hoc, or as you say, the sort of freelance approach. So that is overall what we are trying to do. Now, I'm going to give you much more detail on that, but I thought it was always good to start off with a few examples of the types of projects which have been coming out of universities and which latterly we've been supporting through Aspect. I'm just going to try and move my slides on. So, first example, this isn't actually working with business, but I think is a really excellent initiative. Just shows what can be done. So, it's called In Place of War. It's a global organisation or network that uses the role of arts in places of conflict. So there's a lot of information on the slides. I'm happy to have them circulated. I'll just give you an overview of each project. So, but first of all, to think about the date. So it started back in 2004. That's some time ago now, funded by our Arts and Humanities Research Council, to conduct research into the role of arts in places of conflict, basically using music to bring people together. So what they've done is then they developed a methodology, a toolkit, which they've now rolled out across over 100 individual groups and networks in places of conflict. It's based in the UK. There's a small office there, and then they literally provide the toolkit, provide some consultancy and advice work, and then people on the ground can go and use this methodology to facilitate conflict resolution or try and bring peace as well, bring communities together in places of significant conflict. And is engaged with thousands of people a year. And the interventions are, what happens then is the interventions are tracked and then the data comes back. And so you have this continual evaluation process. Really interesting. It's not business, but it is very interesting to see what can be done. My next one is business. And this actually comes from the LSE, it's one I know very well. And it was an initiative started by asset owners, Church of England and the UK Environment Agency Pension Fund, who are very concerned that their money was being invested in pro-climate companies that were on a pathway to transition, and with the LSE, a research centre called Poutanen. So what the LSE did was develop a methodology for assessing where companies are on a pathway to transition to net zero. So it started off as a research project, had some asset owners behind it, asset managers has also come in behind it. It's now teamed up with FTSE Russell, which is an index producing company based at the London Stock Exchange, to produce an index against which investors can invest. There's currently, the initiative is backed by asset managers with around £60 trillion under asset management. And the index itself has 10 billion being invested in it. Now, this is a really interesting collaboration. It's not a typical one that you would imagine. We get data from FTSE, we provide our own data, we have the methodology, we crunch it all together, and out goes the index. Huge amounts of impact and very, very scalable. And then my third one is comes out of Oxford University, and this is also a toolkit, social metrics. Social scientists are very, very good at producing metrics and data and ways of measuring things. And this is a project that began back in 2007, again some time ago, in the Oxford University International Development Department and their Poverty and Human Development Initiative. And what they did is they created a systematic methodology for assessing poverty, which takes multiple indicators of deprivation. Now, this has been used in the development context for some time. The UN has adopted it, 30 different countries have adopted it. But what they've now done is produced a business version and are now selling, basically licensing this to businesses, multinational corporations, who are concerned to focus on the S in their ESG objectives and are taking the toolkit to assess the poverty of their employees and thereby design appropriate interventions. So again, a really, really interesting way of collaboration, but collaboration which can be at scale. You don't have to be, you've got a toolkit, you've got a methodology, you can license that out, that can be used by multiple different corporations around the world, and then the data can come back in so it can continually refine the product and refine the tool. So again, fascinating way of getting some really innovative business engagement, which we wouldn't necessarily think of if we just take the model, perhaps in engineering, of having a group of researchers from one university sitting alongside and working together with a group of researchers from a business to produce a joint product. So here's are some of the examples, and I'll introduce the aspect itself. So Aurora talked about systematic approaches needed for industry, academic industry collaboration. I say we are collaborating in a particular way, but what we wanted to be able to do was to, as I say, move beyond the ad hoc, but also create networks. Every university only has a very small number of SHAPE academics who want to do this kind of work. We have large numbers of SHAPE academics, not many want to do this kind of work. So, which means that those academics are, quite lonely. There's nobody else to really talk to. And those who are thinking about this have no examples of people to look to who have done it before, but also the professional staff who are trying to support them have no real experience in supporting innovation of this kind. They're very used to supporting those in life sciences or deep tech who are producing patents, which are then licensed or spun out. Not really used to supporting the very wide range of research that comes out of SHAPE disciplines, and which is often focusing on certain sort of horizontals rather than business verticals. So what are we doing? So fortunately, our funders had were very, very keen on promoting collaborations, and sort of decided to gamble £5 million on us, really, to do something which was completely innovative, hadn't been tried before in any country that I've managed to look at. So we were established initially as a group of 3, we grew quickly to 5 universities with a grant for £5 million to focus on research commercialisation. And what we did was first of all, we spent the first couple of years stabilising ourselves, working out what we were doing. We tried business engagement through the usual routes. That didn't really work. We hit on research commercialisation as really the way that we could drive impact sustainably and at scale. So we grew the network up to 10 core members and moving out to about 30 associates. And we've had follow-on funding for another 2 years, so we could expand the remit also to more people, but also more disciplines. We started off with social sciences, we're now Polish shape. And where we are now is we're a self-funded network, but we had developed an accelerator program for Shape academics, and the funders like that element of aspect particularly. And so we've got 4 million in funding to launch a catalyst program, which is open to all academics in all universities across the UK, whether they're members of aspect or not. So that is what we are doing. We now have about 48 members in the UK and internationally. We are open to international members. It is only £2,000, which is just over €2,000 to join as a network member. We have various communities of practice, which bring largely professional sport people together to share learnings, best practice. So we have one on business engagement. We have one on research commercialisation. We have one on student entrepreneurship. We have one on general communications and marketing. We're reconfiguring those as we move forward, but it's over 300 individuals regularly sharing knowledge and good practice. We were able to adopt a very, very experimental approach because the funding gave us a bid fund. So we had lots of different funded projects to see what would work in terms of, for example, business engagement, embedding researchers, mobile fellowships, etc., to try and see what would work. And we found out that the accelerator program was really probably the most impactful. We've got lots of resources on our website, which you can look at. And we have continued collaboration into new funded projects, for example, on social entrepreneurship. Just going to focus quickly on the accelerator program because this might be of interest. So the idea is that it's a 6-month program for academics that provides an overall business canvas support session to explore and build out their idea, and then a training boot camp spread over 3 weeks. Then they get specialised sector-specific training, which is tailored to their own project and their own likely venture. They have dedicated mentor support, and then they have some funding. We also, in terms of bringing networks, you're sort of about building out networks. We also need networks of people who are going to support these ventures. So we have now the Reshape event, annual Reshape event, which brings together academics who are trying to set up their own ventures. It brings together mentors, but also, importantly, it brings together funders and early stage social impact investors from the social impact investing space. So this is, again, something we're really trying to do to build out those networks to ensure that other ventures can develop in a way which means that they can be sustainable. So what have we learned very quickly about the nature of Shape innovation in this way? First of all, it provides new ways to sustain research. As I've talked about, you get new data sources and you get new sources of funding. And it ensures that impacts are scalable and financially sustainable. But what are we doing here? We're mobilizing ideas directly. So I liken it to I always argued at the LSE's motto is betterment of society, and MIT's motto is by your own hand. But it's the betterment of society by your own hand. So you're not handing this over to a policymaker or to a business to say, go improve yourself. You're getting out there and becoming a business often, and then interacting with businesses almost as an equal because you are selling something to them. So it's not research and meet business, but research and become a business. Now, in terms of what is being created, it's creation of intangibles. It's not really pills and widgets. So the commercialization is exploiting ideas, insights, and information. And they're not usually protected by intellectual property rights, and that brings in some distinct features. So it means, first of all, we're open to a wide range of research, but also means that the applications aren't are wide, so the market isn't self-defined. So that does create a sort of difficulty in sort of building out these sort of business networks, because to say they're horizontals, they're not necessarily in verticals in different industry sectors, but they're, you know, how to assess your ESG across any industry, how to assess your societal element of your S, as it were, across any industry, how to develop inclusion in your workforce across any industry. And then there are multiple business models that can be created, absolutely consulting, but moving on to licensing, franchising, includes social enterprises, for-profit companies. The route to market is often shorter, have lots of iteration along the way, and the impact and commercialization are often more closely entwined than they are in STEM research. And most of our researchers are motivated by making a difference, by creating some kind of impact. There are barriers, obviously. So first of all, it's not the norm. There are a few examples, so low awareness and some hostility of wanting to get involved in anything that looks remotely like a business. That's why I always call it mobilizing your research for public good. And social ventures are often a more comfortable way for academics to go forward. It can be hard to scale, however, because the intellectual content and the individual can't really be separated. There's low levels of team research. In shape, researchers tend to work individually on small groups, so you've got armies of PhD students or postdocs who can go out and take the idea and spin it out. We are lacking experienced entrepreneurs to lead ventures. Very interesting what I was talking about. And those three that I just gave you, then actually what has happened in order to bring is that you have separate people who are running those ventures. And in the case of TPI and Wise Responder, they themselves have spent 20 or 30 years in business themselves. It's not capital intensive, it's time intensive. That also came out in the Finnish research. And you need quite long periods of support prior to spinning out. So getting time is always the thing. Further, finally, the ecosystem isn't primed. It's not really used to thinking about engaging with academics in this way. VC and angels aren't necessarily easy to engage. And the funded metrics don't capture the full impact. They tend to focus on revenue or employees, which misses that sort of full social impact that is being created. However, there are some good signs. So we had a recent review of spin-outs by universities in the UK, which praised Aspect as an example of interinstitutional collaboration and for demonstrating the potential for shape research innovation to create impact. For researchers, Aspect is improving their awareness of the opportunities to enhance and scale research. The TTO staff, because we're bringing them all together, we are seeing an upskilling across the TTO staff and supporting their shape researchers in this endeavour. And across the ecosystem, we are creating networks of academic innovators and supporters who can share ideas and knowledge. We are creating new ecosystems of mentors and investors, and we are aiming to create wider measurements of value, social, cultural, and environmental value. There's obviously more we can all do to exploit the power of networks, the conversations that we have today. We need to grow national and international cohorts. As I say, we have members from the Netherlands, members in Australia. We're keen to grow our international cohorts to really just mobilize our collective shape research for public good. We can then create and synthesize joint learnings and insights. We can expand and build networks of mentors and investors on a wider scale. We can develop powerful exemplars of successful shape research innovations for others to inspire others. We can demonstrate to funders the potential for shape innovation to contribute to social and economic prosperity and much, much more. So you can find all the learnings from the Aspect programme on our website. And what we are doing is creating innovative ways of mobilising research for public good. But I'm very happy to take some questions. And I'll stop sharing my slides.
Thank you, Julia. I think at least me, myself, would have a few questions to ask you, but I think we're a bit tight on schedule, so I think we might have to move on to our next presentation, and maybe we can have a Q&A session at a later point of the webinar if you're around.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's go on to our next speaker. He joins us from Denmark. He is a known speaker to many of many people in Finland or in the research community. He's also the professor of innovation design and management at the University of Southern Denmark. And he'll give us a keynote from the researcher's perspective and share some insights from his path as someone who collaborates with companies and has done so for several years. So please welcome Alfred.
Thank you very much. And if I now may share my, hopefully you're seeing that properly. Delightful to be here. My name is, as stated, Alfred, and I usually introduce myself as something of a disciplinary vagabond. I am currently working in very much a STEM environment, but with very much shape issues. I've previously worked in business schools and other kinds of universities, and have the bad habit of not staying stuck to one disciplinary tradition for very long. I've published on, as I state, everything from popular culture to feminist theory to philosophy to some hardcore engineering as well. So I was delighted to come and give a few points from my perspective on industry-academia collaboration. And in particular, interesting to do so as I, for once in my life, actually speak from what could be called a practitioner perspective, sorry. That is normally when I'm invited to things like this, I'm invited as an academic, as an expert, as a professor. Now I speak mainly out of the experience I've had, not merely doing collaborations with industry on my own, but also acting as a kind of middleman, negotiator, passe-partout, to help others form better collaborations in industry. That is, I have tried to aid everything from anthropologists and feminist theorists to sociologists and the occasional business scholar to actually improve their collaboration with industry. So what I'm going to say today are personal reflections, not based on any form of large-scale research, nor on any theoretical study of the collaboration literature, but rather some notes on what I've found actually happens in these attempts. And let's start from the kind of elephant in the room. There is, of course, this dream of the perfect alignment, the dream of taking the resources of industry and the insights of academia and somehow completely without problems aligning these to each other. And it is a beautiful dream. It is a delightful dream. But at the same time, it might be that it's a dream that actually is holding us back. Not in as much that we should stop doing it, but that there seems to be a sensation that this alignment is relatively easy to do, and that it would be enough simply to have one more conference, one more setup, one more meeting, and the alignment could come into play. What I found interesting in the white paper was the fact that it highlights many of the differences that actually exist between these different worlds, between our different logic. Time was mentioned, which I've often noted that industry demands result in rapid time, whereas many a researcher thinks that a year is a good time to think and ponder on a problem. And what this leads to is, of course, that we start all these collaborations in a high level of asymmetry. An asymmetry of incentives, an asymmetry of times, an asymmetry even of language. That is quite often what I've been struck at when it comes to not managing to negotiate a collaboration, not managing to get a good researcher to work with that I know would be a good industrial partner, is that these asymmetries have not been openly and transparently discussed. That we thought that it's enough if we just kind of get into a room and chat with each other, forgetting that it actually takes far more than this, that we need to actually find a joint language, we need to find joint processes, and we need to find some form of structure where a collaboration makes sense for all parties. Here, it is interesting to note that even in the chat to this webinar, somebody raised the fact that there are those in academia who ultimately and vehemently oppose being sullied by any form of capitalist logic, any form of collaboration with people with the intent of making money off of a collaboration. I can personally have some level of sympathy with this. I've worked with anarchist communes, I've worked with fairly hardcore pirates, but I have to say that if collaboration is to be expected, sometimes one needs to temper the expectations. I have yet to find a company that is very keen to, for instance, fund a anarchist black bloc group, even though it would be a delight to try to kind of shepherd a conversation between these two groups. What I'm trying to say here is that, yes, we may dream of alignment, but we need to be open to these asymmetries. Not just that we accept them in the others, that we externalize and say, oh, companies don't get it, or oh, academics don't get it, but rather that these asymmetries are a necessary part of the life world logic we come from. We also need to be open to the fact that industry and academic collaboration, despite the beautiful examples Julia showed, is often quite messy. Academics, and I may only speak of the academics I know, but there are quite a few, are normally not the greatest project managers. They're normally not the most focused individuals either. They tend to have many irons in the proverbial fire and tend to flit quite happily from one project to another, whereas industry, for better or worse, tends to operate in a more focused manner and often in a more professional manner when it comes to issues such as keeping to strict deadlines, keeping to deliverables, keeping to project management. Again, not saying this to cast doubt or aspersions on anyone, merely trying to state that a lot of what I read on academia-industry collaboration is highly romanticized. It paints a beautiful picture of how things go when they go at their best, and I have seen these cases. They, in my very unscientific approximation, are about 1% of the actual collaborations. The remaining 99 show a considerable amount of messiness, and a need for constant renegotiation, a need for constant touching on points of how collaboration was supposed to work, what was supposed to happen, and keeping these communication channels open. I think what I'm trying to say is that this notion we talk about here, industry academia collaboration, might seem, when we speak in webinars such as these, as a clear-cut thing. Do this, do that, get it structured, and hey, presto, money and tenure for all. Whereas in actuality, tends to be a most amorphous thing, requiring constant pending and renegotiation. As a quick example, I worked with some philosopher friends of mine to kind of collaborate, for them to collaborate with some IT companies on issues regarding data ethics. Lots of NDAs involved, so I can't give too much detail. Everything started out wonderfully. Everything started out, both parties were interested, both parties made great promises, and then the inevitable project creep sets in. In project management, which I've also studied, by the way, we know full well that the promises made and the ideas laid out in the very beginning tend to crash immediately as they make contact with reality. Or in the words of that great philosopher Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. But as the project went on, the different parties started to veer further and further apart from each other, blaming the other part for things that weren't going as smoothly as required, and refusing to actually find a language and a vernacular through which these conflicts could be negotiated. We managed to do so regardless through a number of facilitated meetings and so on. But what I want to highlight with this is that if we believe that there is one pattern, one checklist, one perfect model for industry-academia collaboration, then the whole project should be abandoned to start. These kinds of projects are amorphous. They depend on the disciplinary traditions people come from. They depend to a great deal of the industry that they come into. They depend a great deal on personal chemistry. The notion that we sometimes carry with us that somehow there would be a magic bean or a magic pill that could make all these problems go away, often forget the fact that the successes that we see in STEM for long-term industry-academia collaboration also started out as messes. They came to be the stable, structured way through years, if not even decades, of trying to establish language, trying to establish processes, trying to establish trust between parties. I was discussing with a dear colleague in robotics who pointed out it was only the first 7 years of industry collaborations that were truly difficult, but the remaining 7 had only been moderately difficult, simply because they'd learned to work with each other. Again, not trying to cast aspersions or saying this is an impossibility, just trying to point out it takes hard work, which we sometimes forget, and it takes hard work from all parties. All that said, all this negativity that I now managed to spew into this otherwise highly optimistic webinar does not mean that there isn't a possibility for an apotheosis, a perfectly working industrial collaboration. I have seen them, I've worked in them, I have enjoyed them. However, these do not emerge in and of themselves. And I am slightly worried how often we are looking outward to an assumed third party, an other, if you want to be sociological about it, when trying to establish these true collaborations. I have always said collaboration is an individual research skill. It is something we train for. It is something we need to become better at as individual researchers. Yes, we can organize through foundations, through conferences, or through the many offices for collaboration that pop up in various universities and, well, employ a lot of people who are neither industry people nor academics, but still somehow are supposed to solve this problem. We have through this forgotten that it actually takes an skill set, knowledge that researchers would do well to actually practice on. My first collaborations with industry were absolutely terminally bad. They were marred by my ego, marred by my misunderstanding of the industry, marred by, well, male youthful arrogance, I would say. And what is required is that we as researchers take a step back and instead of imagining, oh, there's a consultant, they will fix it. There's a foundation, they will fix it. Actually start taking personal responsibility for these collaborations. And yes, I know personal responsibility is not the most PC thing one can claim any longer, as it can sound very damning and demanding. But I'm still going to do so. And I'm going to say that there are at least 3 things that we as researchers and they as industrial partners need to work on. The first is humility. It might not come as a great surprise that some members, some captains of industry have a bit of an ego on them. I know quite a few CEOs, and although not all of them are narcissists, a couple of them are. I also know a lot of professors. They also have a bit of an ego on them, and although not all of them are narcissists, some of them definitely are. What I often see when I bring people together from academia and industry is not a meeting of assumed equals where one is open and humble to actually have a transparent conversation, but assumptions of the other, where we researchers are quite as capable of arrogance as those assumed captains of industry are. And the captains in industry, they at least assume they have something to gain, so they sometimes even come in with more humility. We need to be better at listening to the other party. better at understanding the other party, better at kind of realizing why they actually would want to come into this kind of collaboration. Far too often I've seen academics simply lecture to professionals and other agents of industry about why they have to understand that feminist theory, philosophy, sociology, or for that matter, art, is something that they absolutely have to support, with no kind of stopping and asking what these professionals or people in industry actually think about it all. It might come as a shock to some, but not all CEOs are completely unread. They are not all complete and utter bastards. Quite a few of them are intelligent, well-read, and charming individuals. We will not always know this from the attempts at collaboration, but it's still true. We need also, as researchers, to humble ourselves a little, just as industry needs to have a humility and understand where we're coming from. This, of course, simply requires more communication. We need to be better at speaking to our counterparties in a language that they understand. I am capable of speaking the most jargon-filled academese you could ever imagine. I'm trained as a post-structural philosopher and an anthropologist. I can kill you with words if I wish to. I've opted not to, not in this presentation, nor when I talk to academics, nor when I talk to industry. Even though I have lectured on queer theory and Butler to CEOs, I mostly try to speak to them with terminology that makes sense to them and ask questions in terminology that makes sense to them, not to lessen my own research, but to establish a line of communication. We can get to the over-referencing and the quotations later, but we need to actually start to understand that there is a language barrier here and do our part to work through this. And I would see the exact same to CEOs. I have berated CEOs who started throwing around business terms in meetings and saying, you do know that none of it that you and I understand what you're talking about. Talk like a human being for once. So the error is often on both sides of the table. I'm no way trying to impugn academics in particular here, just saying academics too have things to learn here. And last, and perhaps most surprising, I believe that we often forget the importance of generosity in these collaborations. I'm a big fan of generosity, having done my original PhD on gift economies and so on. And an old mentor once taught me, generosity in academia is so incredibly rare that practicing it can be a true differentiator. When I go into an industry collaboration, I do not start by asking, what is in it for me? What do I want to get out of it? How much money can I get out of these people? I go in and ask how I can be of help to them, what I can give to them that would actually be joyful to them, helpful to them, fun to them, yes, even profitable to them. I do this because I know that by showing a little bit of generosity, I can then start a negotiation and find a better end result for all involved parties. And I've found that simply the act of coming in as an academic and not starting by telling them how much money I want out of them actually is a very, very efficient way. Recently got me into one of the top consultancies in the world who are now very keen to collaborate simply because I did something as cheap as buy them a couple of tickets to a conference and promising that in this first pilot, I'm not trying to skin them for money. All this comes together to say that the journey continues. It's a long travel. There's many problems here, but if we want the progress, we cannot do so by assuming that the other party is the bad guy, we're the good guys, and there needs to be a third guy or gal as a negotiator between us two. Instead, even in the shape field, there needs to be an investment, a personal investment in the individual skills that true collaboration still demands, and a humility from both parties to enter in to what I hope would be an open, transparent, and generous dialogue between the parties. Thank you very much. I know I'm slightly over time.
Thank you so much, Al, for this thought-provoking speech. I think there's plenty of researchers in our audience who can think about these things for themselves. I would like to proceed to our next speaker just to make sure everybody has their time to speak, and then we can see if we could have a shared Q&A session just to make sure that we are fair and generous to everyone here. So our last but not least speaker comes from the industry, and she will speak to us about the contradictory role of arts, humanities, and social sciences in the transformation of industries. She is specifically knowledgeable about the case of textile and fashion industry. So please welcome Marja-Liisa Niinikoski, who is the Managing Director of the Finnish Textile and Fashion Association.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation to this webinar where you release your white paper. And as said, I work for the Finnish Textile and Fashion. And now I really try to share my slides here. And this said that it, are you still hearing me? Because I got a message.
Yes, we can still hear you, but we can't see your slides.
Great. Yes, and now hopefully you can see my slides as well.
Yes, we can see the slides and we can see the sidebar as well. So it's not in presenter mode, but we can still see the slides.
It's not in the presenter's mode.
No.
Oh, and it's in my screen as it is. Let's see what I can do. Share screen.
Maybe you can see if you activate the presenter mode before you share. Yes, now it's in the full screen mode. Thank you.
Thank you. So the Finnish Textile and Fashion, it represents the Finnish textile and fashion apparel industry. And we negotiate the general labor agreement. We offer services for our member companies, and as well as we try to improve the prerequisites of industry here in Finland. So few words about then how I see the social impact of arts, humanities, and social sciences in our industry. I here utilize into structure in my presentation a quite recent paper where they have analyzed what is the social impact of this kind of research in society. And first of all, we all can see that we more and more discuss how important it is to understand not only the research and its results, but what are the evaluation paradigms in science governance. So we discussed the third task of academia and research in our society. And when we discuss the societal impact, it's not only the outcomes, what are the research results, but as we have also heard, it's the dialogue within the society, with the relationship with science, art, and society. And for instance, concerning our industry, the role of the questions and challenges that social sciences can bring, they can explain, for instance, what is the role of fast fashion and the role of consumer, reflect, to discuss and interpret the issue of our industry, educate also in terms of sustainability issues, and also inform, for instance, decision makers that what should be done in terms of certain values that the industry should carry. But at the same time, in those interactive settings, there might arise different kind of challenges between industries and researchers. There might be, as we already heard, conflicting system logics behind, the language barriers, even the institutional challenges in the academia, how they can carry the third task, probably lack of resources, organizational support, lack of rewards, etc., etc. But, and then furthermore, there can be also possibly conflicting quality expectations, what you think that the research should bring to your industry, or on the other way around, how the industry can help then research and social sciences to carry their research activities. And as a case example, one of the topics and one of the role of social sciences in our industry is that they can frame the problems. As said, there are research papers that which discuss that only the only way to end the fast fashion is to end it. So it's really a challenge for the fast fashion industry. But at the same time, other researchers try to find the solution, for instance, how data can enhance circular economy of textiles. So at the same time, the role of the social sciences here in our industry is to help to understand, but at the same time, as said, reflect, explain, and so where the problem might be. And then absolutely, it's related to issue of what are the values in society, what you see as a problem, and what you want to, how do you want to solve it. But at the same time, it's good to pay attention that this kind of research, it has kind of epistemic challenges, as they call it, because of the, compared to hard natural sciences, from this field of research, you hardly never get what we call no single truths, but you can see different views, how to see, how to frame the problems, and what kind of perspectives they have to offer. And therefore, there are the different schools of thoughts, and therefore understanding the role of social sciences, humanities in society. Therefore, I would say that it has this double role. At the same time, they can help us to understand and help decision makers what should be done, but their role is at the same time to tell and also frame the problem, ask the questions. And therefore, I don't think that in the end of the day, there is no single answer for this question, but the kind of the dual role of this type of research and sciences should be understood. Furthermore, I would like to, what is really a key issue currently, what we see happening in our industry is also the role of consumption. So what is the consumer's behavior? And what we can see when we ask people that how they behave and what are they habits to consume, they very easily say that we want to buy sustainable products, we want to do this and that. But in the end of the day, many of consumers make their decision based on the price. So how then the research can help us to understand? And there are research results which say that educating consumers, doing better product labeling, offering good arguments, and helping people to reuse and recycle products might help also go in towards sustainable consumption. And at the same time, we still see that when the decision is made by single consumer, they hardly can see what kind of systemic impact that might have at the level of society. Then when we look deeper at various consumer groups, for instance, we have currently with one University of Applied Sciences a research project going on where we have our member companies, universities, and then young people and educational institutions, where we try to understand young people's role as consumers And one of the observations have been so far that they are quite uncertain in the market as consumers. And so the role of, we discuss in that research project, the role of family, as well as the role of their peer groups and the role of schools and sustainable education, how this can help people to be and increase their certainty as a market player. So as said, this industry really is going through big transformation. It's partly through the green transition, and for instance, in the currently here in the European Union, based on the Green Deal, there is lots of new legislation coming. But at the same time, we discuss also the digital transition, which in itself can help this industry to transform. But nevertheless, as I said, there is always the role of the consumer. And currently, I'm really interested personally in the topic of what I have started to call the triple transition, not only green, digital, and consumption, not only green and digital, but also consumption. And therefore, I've started to think of that how, for instance, in Finland, Business Finland and Finnish Academy, which are big funding agencies in Finland, could put these topics together. So very often we see that we still focus on technical or technological or material innovations, but should we try to more put under the same research agendas and project also topics from, let's say, consumer research and social sciences, that we from the early beginning require wider perspectives within the research programs and funded projects. So what I think still of the role of this kind of fields of research is that at the same time, when they try to solve our problems in society, their role is really to challenge the problem and the solution. So we need the both role of research coming from these fields. The impact can be discrete, indirect, and sometimes conceptual, meaning that we really can frame a phenomena and give the name for it. But what I think is that productive interactions between various research areas and sciences are needed. And then it's not only the question of research outputs, but how we design the research programs and the research questions where technical and, for instance, social sciences can try to do multidisciplinary research. And therefore, what I really argue for are the new research settings for sustainable innovations, business and sustainable consumptions through this kind of multidisciplinary research approaches. So I also added, if you share some references I used to prepare my presentation for this webinar. And on my behalf, I really like to thank you to be able to share some thoughts of the role of these sciences and their role to build up more sustainable industry in our society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marja-Liisa. I would invite all the speakers to join us for a short Q&A session, and for everybody in the audience to leave your questions through the chat or through the Q&A, so that before you go, you can get answers to anything that is making you think right now. I know we have one question for Julia here in the chat, where Lauri Oksanen asks that, can you please talk more on why you ended with the venturing model? Did you find that researcher meets industry does not work for the benefit of either in shape?
It's a really good question. And no, we didn't find that actually. And in fact, we still do. We have a business engagement community of practice. But what we found, so there's a few reasons. And what we found was, first of all, the level of need. So what we're actually are both our academics, but also our professional services staff, those kind of intermediaries that Alf was talking about, what do they really need to focus on? And we found they had often quite developed business engagement teams, but they didn't really have much experience in the venture space. So that was the first. So it was the kind of need across the network. The second is where is the gap in provision? And elsewhere, as it were, in the funding landscape in the UK, we have things funded which are called catalysts in the UK. And they're funded by our national funders, and they bring together businesses and industry, and they're usually based around an anchor institution. And in the shape space, then there are two in fashion, for example, which is a really interesting area of collaboration. They're quite interdisciplinary. So it was that kind of gap was being filled for somewhere else. And then the third for us is we found that it tends to get very specific very quickly. So we've got toolkits out there for business engagement. Alf, I loved your overview there and the way that you put it in a very dry, humorous, but absolutely on point way. But once you kind of move beyond the generics and actually trying to organize academics and other universities in with businesses, we tried a few times in different verticals. It's actually quite a complicated thing to do. It goes to that amorphous point. So not something which is very well suited to the type of network that we were building. And as I say, not that we're not interested in that, and it is a part of it, but in terms of what we could do jointly as a joint project, as it were, and where we found the need is in the venture building space. So on our accelerator now, and Alf, you also talked about, and Marja, I really enjoyed your comments as well, but just to the point about generosity. So really set up aspects on the basis of generosity of spirit. So you do have tech transfer people from one university helping and academics in another university achieve their project. So what we actually need funders to do is to support that generosity by rewarding collaboration. Yeah. Because in the UK system, it's highly competitive. We then pitch one against the other. So, X's project is better than University Y's project, which puts incentives in not to collaborate, right? So we need to really get funders to counteract that competitive spirit if they do want this collaboration and reward that collaboration. So, we do have experts coming in from, sharing their contacts, sharing their mentors, sharing their ideas to help academics from universities other than their own achieve this project. And that is really important. And that to me is the absolute essence of aspect. And if we lose that, then we've lost what is our key element. So that is why we put bigger on the venture space, not because we've given up, as it were, on the shape meets business. We haven't at all, but just for the type of network we are, the type of thing we're trying to do, and the needs, that was the gap. And that we were most able to.
Thank you, Julia. Alf and Marja-Liisa, do you have something you would like to add to this?
I mean, this is something where one could speak for a prolonged period of time. I'll just give a quick kind of comment. I believe the push to try to get academics who are trying to wrap their heads around the research problem, then try to bring that to the pragmatics of industry, and then try to force for instance, a venture capital or similar business model on top of that. That is just one barrier too many. I mean, it will emerge if it emerges. I worked with a number of academics who managed to then find a business model and get funding and so on, but that came far, far later. Yeah, and it's a small group as well. But I mean, that doesn't mean you can't go and start a collaboration. So I'm thinking that venture logic can hamper projects before they even have a chance to prove that they're workable. That doesn't mean that I'm against venture models. It's just that they have their place and they shouldn't be the defining characteristic of these collaborations. I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Marja-Liisa, do you have something to add or?
Actually, not that much, but at the same time, what I see is that, for instance, in our industry, tech can bring, from the tech side, you can bring many new innovations, but at the same time, when you try to understand the consumer behavior, and then tech innovations are easy to venture, But then if it comes to the consumer behavior and the role of social sciences, sometimes it's not that easy, but maybe all the data and that kind of solutions which are coming through AI and things like that, there is also maybe more room for this kind of venturing model approach. Might be the case.
I would like to go a little bit back. I was thinking about this question in Julia's presentation, also in Alf's, where this aspect of capitalism, business thinking versus anarchy, or whatever you might want to call it, came through. Do you see this being a primary problem for these collaborations? Alf mentioned that we need to change our attitudes on the researcher side to seeing the potential and the possibilities in these. But how have you experienced this, Julia? Is there something that needs to be done on a more higher scale, or in the communication within research universities, funders, to change this mindset of being against each other and actually being in the same? Because this is something that Marja-Liisa also pointed out, that actually we need each other to create these new questions and really know what we need to do. But who is responsible? Alf says that it's the researchers who need to take responsibility, but is there somebody else that needs to also act?
Just to specify, I said researchers also need to take responsibility.
That's a good.
Not that they are the only.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes two hands to clap, as we say. I think so. Yeah, no, really good question. I mean, the first thing I always like to, it's really important to practice these conversations with, is not every academic has to do this, and not every academic is suited to this, and not every type of research is suited to this. And it's not something that everybody has to do, and it's not something that even those who do want to do this, and their research outputs are suitable to it, it's not something they need to do at every single stage of their academic career. So that's the first practice. So, and I think it's really important, therefore, that funders and others recognise that it's okay, and in fact you need to limit your ambitions, okay, on what it is you can expect academics to do. And moreover, last time I checked, academics already have full-time jobs. So this is always being done on the side of a very, very busy desk. And so, therefore supporting academics to find time to do this, rewarding it, getting the promotion structures right, etc., to incentivize it, all of those different things have to be done and in place. But I think but I do think it can be, for the right type of academic with the right type of research, it can be incredibly fruitful. Why? Why would it not be? Why is it not always fruitful to talk to somebody else, right? Who just not share your point of view and whose answers you don't already know before they said them? Why is that not an interesting thing to do? In a way, you are going to learn more. And if you're open and receptive to those absolute points, then hopefully it will also change your point of view as you helping to change somebody else's point of view. But I do also, to your point about there being no single truth. I mean, if we were scientists in STEM, they say they've got no single truth either. But you're absolutely right that, every social scientist will come up with a different framing, a different set of questions, and a different set of solutions. And so anticipating, well, what is it you are, really what questions are being asked, and what is it that can be offered and can be given? So it's not that it can't be done, and the responsibility is absolutely shared. But again, I think it's just the tempering of ambition on all sides as to the scale that is achievable over the time frame, and the level of difficulty. It's just hard, and it takes some time, as we've been saying. And so, but that doesn't mean it's not worth trying.
So what I would also like to add to this discussion, what I didn't so much emphasize in my presentation, is also we have discussed here researchers and researchers' role, but also the artists and the designers and their role, because what we see that what fashion, for instance, means for people is building their identities showing their belonging, that they belong to certain communities and groups. So artists also and designers can make lots of decisions. For instance, what comes to the selection of materials, what is the way of building the identity in our society through clothing and through fashion. So for instance, what I've discussed recently with one professor who is thinking of her program for these fashion designers is that how she could educate them to be activists in their own companies. So I think that the academia in both role, like educating designers even in our industry, but also researchers, that the role of academia is quite huge. And so therefore, what I wanted to add to this is also kind of not only what we say in the papers, but also well-educated designers, how they act and what kind of society they want to give and show us in the future. So that was also one aspect I wanted to mention here.
Yeah, entrepreneurial activism sounds like a term that could really find some support. Alf, did you have something to add? There's also some questions in the chat that we can move on to.
It sort of ties to this, and it's basically I'm answering questions from this to going to link these different conversations together a bit. Lauri there asked, because I mentioned CEOs a couple of times. Well, that's simply because they happen to be the people I collaborate with. But I believe there's a deeper point to Lauri's point. I've found that a lot of time academics do not dare to go high enough in corporate hierarchies to necessarily get the kind of responses that they would. I know that in a lot of the shape fields, these can be questions that the middle manager might be completely sound completely off the reservation and not workable in their context, when they on the top management level can seem perfectly apposite and perfectly strategically well-fitting. Just last week I was sitting and listening at a seminar where a very philosophical discussion on play got 80 CEOs kind of highly interested in collaborating on play and getting more playfulness into their organization, because CEOs tend to get it. So Lauri, I'm not saying it has to be a CEO, obviously. I mean, middle managers are very important, lab managers, everything else. I'm just saying that there's also an importance to actually go to the right strategic level where this collaboration can be done, and where the activism that Marja-Liisa referred to actually can have an impact. And as to Outi's question about, well, what if you have no previous experience? Well, this is a problem, and we need also senior professors, etc., need to become better at mentoring and taking younger scholars by the hand, and bringing them to the meetings and introducing them to their contacts. So there, I'm very much. I wouldn't say I'm a fan of hierarchy. I'm a fan of the responsibilities of seniors, of being the ones who actually help junior colleagues learn the tricks of the trade and the ropes of collaboration, as it were, because that too is connected to the kind of building up the skill set. I'm not just saying everyone for themselves or that everyone needs to do it, but that we need to have a conversation internally in academia about how we learn these skills and also how we pass these skills on.
Thank you. There's one specific question to Julia, which was, can you offer an example of a successful collaboration/venture wherein an academic from the university helped support the success of another academic group in a venture model?
So that's a good question. So what we're doing in the acceleration, the Catalyst and Acceleration program that we have, is that we have groups like it. So it's not by support staff from different universities, but we also then are building out a cohort of academics who themselves have been through this process and creating a sort of alumni network, as it were, so that those academics then could be mentors to other academics who are going through this process. Because it is really hard, right? and the so you build out that kind of more mentoring network. As I say, for the most time, people actually, we're often forced into a competitive relationship by funding and evaluation bodies. But academics naturally collaborate. They'll naturally collaborate with people across universities, across the globe, wherever it is their interest and their shared research takes them. So they're natural collaborators. And so we're trying to push this collaborative culture, as it were, as a counter to the sort of competitive environment, which is probably quite a UK thing that we find ourselves in.
Thank you. I think we need to start wrapping up, but just to close this Q&A, I would like a short answer from all the panelists on what do you think should be done next? Bring these two areas closer together, business and shape disciplines.
So as like representing the industry, so what I would like to see here in Finland is like what I said, more multidisciplinary research. We need a change to a certain extent. And what I'm expecting, I would like to see new type of research program really much integrating social sciences, tech, and maybe business studies as well. That would be my next dream.
Thank you. Who wants to go next?
I can continue and let Julia close us off. I would say that the next step is simply that researchers need to practice listening skills, remembering that industry is out there and they are keen for anything that will aid, help, and support them, but also to learn to communicate them on their level or in their language. Not level, that sounded bad, in their language. And I think that for all of us, generosity actually goes a long way. Julia pointed out academics are born collaborators. Academics at least used to be born generous. That was how we were trained originally, sharing, giving away, doing lots of unpaid labor, which obviously has been misused by some. But I think there is something to be said for the old academic virtues of humility and generosity.
Thank you.
The one thing about going last after two fantastic speakers, you can just say I agree with everything they said. That's also a bit of cop-out. So I do agree with everything that has been said. I would just add to that is a recognition that if you want systemic change, you have to crank the system to support that. Now, in the funder space, what that is enabling the funding of these collaborations, but also recognizing this type of engagement, whether it's through kind of ventures, whether it's through engagement, takes time, and needs to give people space away from their day jobs on both sides to really explore the potential of what it is that they're trying to do to create that impact. So whether that's provide longer runways, whether that's provide, that better kind of institutional support and funding, but it's to recognize that actually, if you want a systematic way to enhance business engagement or the type of venturing that I've been talking about, you need to change the system in order to support that.
Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you all panelists, and thank you everybody in the audience for participating today. This has been a very helpful conversation. I think just talking about these things is surely a step forward. Petro, do you have some closing words you would like to share as we wrap up?
Well, yes, thank you. Thank you, Aurora. I wrote down some slides, but I guess we are already running late in our time. So maybe I just want to say my warm thank you to all the presenters and engaged participants for contributing to today's session, and maybe something to say from the point of view of the foundation as we are concluding this session now. It's kind of clear that the work in terms of enhancing collaboration is far from over. A lot of people we've been talking to in universities, for example, have said that we don't want another workshop anymore on this subject, because our researchers won't come to the workshop anyway. And we need something that motivates and generates action. That's the message to our direction when we've been having these discussions with stakeholders, and we kind of agree. It's time for action also, what we think about. So maybe each of us in our own organizations, whether it's a university or an academic organizations or a company, or whether we are researchers or funders, we can think about these issues and how we can bring them into our own organizations. Are the structures there such that they support these sort of activities? Is my own attitude such that I can find these opportunities if I'm open to them, if they can provide any good for me in terms of my research goals? Is there some abilities inside of our company, some competencies within our workforce that actually know quite a lot about research on shape disciplines, and we can use these people to build bridges to the academic community. And what we are doing now, this is our start of the process. We try to enhance our own understanding of the shape disciplines, and this seminar, this webinar, and this process of making this investigation and the report and everything that Aurora and Outi has done for us. With this respect, this has been an enormous step for us to understand better how we can, through our funding instruments, understand and support also researcher from shape disciplines. So this is basically what I wanted to leave you with, and thank you all for this great opportunity to share ideas.